The sky darkened as Morgan approached the abandoned radio tower. Strange signals had been broadcasting from this location for 3 nights. Signals that only Morgan could hear. The weathered metal structure loomed against the twilight, its silhouette a stark reminder of technologies left behind. Everyone said the tower had been decommissioned years ago, yet somewhere in that rusted skeleton, something was calling out. Morgan adjusted the homemade frequency detector and took a deep breath. Some mysteries demand to be solved, even when every instinct screams to walk away. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The gravel crunched beneath Morgan's boots as the last remnants of daylight disappeared behind the hills. The abandoned radio tower stood like a forgotten sentinel, its once important purpose now just a memory. Local teenagers sometimes ventured here on dares, but tonight, Morgan was alone, or at least that's how it appeared. 3 nights ago, the dreams had started. They weren't ordinary dreams, but transmissions that pierced Morgan's sleep. Fragments of code, coordinates, and desperate pleas for help. Each morning, Morgan woke with the same sequence burned into memory. 42.9019 degree N, 78.4012 degree W, coordinates that led directly to this decommissioned tower. As an electrical engineer whose career had stalled at the local community college, Morgan had the knowledge to build a crude frequency detector. The device now hummed in the pocket of an old military jacket, vibrating more intensely with each step toward the tower's base. Willowbrook was a town where nothing remarkable happened. People worked, raised families, and eventually died without fanfare. Morgan had planned to escape after high school, but family obligations and financial realities had anchored those dreams. Now, at 34, freedom seemed like a luxury meant for others. The chain-link fence surrounding the tower had long since been trampled by curious visitors. Morgan stepped through the gap, noticing how the detector's vibrations intensified. According to the building plans filed with the county clerk's office, which required considerable persuasion to access, there should be a maintenance entrance near the western support leg. The air grew colder as Morgan circled the structure. This tower had been built during the Cold War, designed not just for commercial radio, but as part of an emergency broadcast system. What most residents didn't know was that beneath the tower sat a small bunker, a relic of paranoid times. The entrance appeared camouflaged by overgrowth, exactly where the plans had indicated. The heavy metal door should have been locked, possibly rusted shut after years of abandonment. Yet, when Morgan pulled the handle, it swung open with well-oiled ease. "Someone's been here," Morgan whispered, voice disappearing into the darkness. Beyond the doorway, the frequency detector now pulsed rapidly, almost painfully against the hip. Morgan pulled out a flashlight and directed its beam down a narrow staircase. The concrete walls were lined with old electrical conduits, some broken open to reveal frayed wiring. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, creating an arrhythmic soundtrack to this descent. 20 steps down, the staircase opened into a small room filled with outdated equipment. Most of it appeared untouched for decades. Dust-covered consoles with analog dials, reel-to-reel tape machines, and bulky monitors. But one section looked different. In the center of the room, a modern setup stood in stark contrast. A sleek laptop connected to the old broadcasting equipment with a complex array of adapters and converters. The frequency detector went silent as Morgan approached the laptop. Its screen glowed with a simple interface, a message input box, and a broadcasting meter showing active transmission. "Who set this up?" Morgan muttered, scanning the room for any signs of the operator. The laptop suddenly flickered, and a message appeared. "Are you listening?" Morgan stepped back instinctively. The message remained for several seconds before changing. "If you can read this, you are the one we've been calling." With hesitant fingers, Morgan typed a response. "Who are you?" The reply came instantly. We are the forgotten. We exist in the spaces between frequencies. A chill ran down Morgan's spine that had nothing to do with the bunker's temperature. This had to be some elaborate prank, perhaps orchestrated by former students. Yet something about the precision of those dreams, the coordinates that led here, suggested otherwise. Morgan typed again, "What do you want from me? Your help." The barrier is thinning. We are bleeding through. Before Morgan could respond, the laptop displayed a series of images, satellite photographs of Willowbrook and the surrounding area. Each image showed the same anomaly. A subtle distortion, like heat waves rising from pavement, concentrated around 7 distinct locations. The radio tower was one of them. The final image showed a map with all 7 locations marked, forming a perfect heptagon around the town. At the center of this geometric pattern was Morgan's house. The screen filled with grandfather's face, older than Morgan remembered, but with the same kind eyes and serious expression. "If you're watching this," he began, "then the safeguards are failing, and the entities have found a way to contact you through your dreams. This was always a possibility. The Hayes family has a genetic quirk that makes us receptive to their frequencies." He explained that the entities weren't malevolent, but their existence in our reality could have unpredictable consequences. The containment system wasn't designed to imprison them, but to regulate the boundary between their reality and ours. The government team that's surely tracking you now has a different perspective, he continued. They believe complete isolation is the only safe approach. When I disagreed, I was removed from the project. But I knew someday the system would begin to fail, and someone would need to understand the truth. The video continued with detailed instructions for accessing the other 6 transmission points and the specific recalibrations needed at each location. The work would need to be completed within 48 hours, before the barrier degraded beyond repair. "You have a choice," Dr. Hayes concluded. "You can walk away, destroy this laptop, and pretend you know nothing. The government team will reset the system their way, severing all contact with the entities permanently. Or you can complete my work and maintain the balance I designed, allowing limited communication while preventing full manifestation. The choice must be yours. But remember, these entities have existed alongside humanity for our entire history. They've been watching, learning, and possibly guiding us in ways we've never understood. Good luck." The video ended, leaving Morgan staring at the blank screen, the weight of an impossible decision settling in. Outside, an owl hooted, an ordinary sound that somehow felt like an affirmation. Morgan went to the basement and found the boxes of grandfather's journals. They were exactly where they'd been left years ago, gathering dust on metal shelving. The journals contained hand-drawn circuit diagrams, frequency calculations, and personal observations about the entities. One passage stood out. They speak of time differently. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously for them. When they mention coming disasters, they don't do so as warnings, but as observations of events that, to them, have already occurred. If we could properly interpret their communications, we might gain insights that could change humanity's trajectory. A noise from outside interrupted Morgan's reading, the sound of tires on the gravel driveway. Moving quickly to the window, Morgan saw what was feared: 2 black SUVs approaching the house, their headlights cutting through the darkness. There was no time to run. The choice had to be made now: surrender to the government team and allow them to implement their solution, or commit to grandfather's path, which meant immediate action. Morgan grabbed the laptop and a journal containing the most critical information, then headed for the hidden storm cellar accessible through a trapdoor in the pantry. This wasn't just a shelter from tornadoes. Grandfather had modified it years ago, lining the walls with a mesh that blocked electromagnetic signals. It would provide temporary safety while Morgan formulated a plan. The cellar was small but equipped, with basic necessities: water, preserved food, a chemical toilet, and a hand crank generator that could power the laptop for short periods. As Morgan pulled the trapdoor shut, heavy footsteps sounded on the porch above. In the darkness of the cellar, with only the laptop's glow providing illumination, Morgan studied the map showing all 7 transmission points. The nearest one after, the radio tower, was located beneath the old limestone quarry, 3 miles east of town. According to grandfather's notes, each point needed specific recalibration to strengthen the containment field without completely isolating the entities. The process involved adjusting the transmission frequencies to accommodate technological evolution, particularly the proliferation of wireless networks that had fundamentally changed our electromagnetic environment since the system was last calibrated. Voices filtered down from above. Professional, methodical, searching the house room by room. These weren't local authorities but specialized personnel who knew exactly what they were looking for. Morgan opened an application on the laptop labeled Frequency Monitor. It displayed a real-time analysis of electromagnetic activity in the AI area. The readings showed increasingly erratic patterns, evidence that the containment field was indeed degrading. New message appeared on screen. They cannot find you while you remain in this shielded space. You must reach the limestone point before dawn. The entities were still communicating, aware of Morgan's situation. This wasn't just about fulfilling a grandfather's legacy anymore. It was about making an informed choice between 2 approaches to an extraordinary situation. Morgan typed back, "Why should I trust you?" The response came quickly. "We have existed alongside humanity since your first radio signals reached our domain. We have watched your kind evolve technologically. We have seen your potential and your flaws. We do not wish domination. Only dialogue." "What happens if the barrier fails completely?" Morgan asked. "Unpredictable integration. Our consciousness would affect your electronic systems. Your reality would experience anomalies. Not destruction, but disruption." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. The voices above had grown more distant. They were searching the outbuildings now. Soon they would discover the cellar. Morgan had to make a decision. The government team would implement a permanent solution, severing all contact with these entities. Grandfather had believed in a balanced approach, containing but not isolating. In that moment, staring at the pulsing patterns, why your dreams? Your grandfather built safeguards into the frequencies. His blood runs in your veins. You can hear us because you were meant to. Morgan's grandfather had been an electrical engineer for the government, a quiet man who rarely discussed his work. He had died when Morgan was just 12, leaving behind boxes of journals filled with complex equations and circuit designs that no one in the family understood. Those boxes now gathered dust in Morgan's basement. A new message appeared. Others are coming. They know the safeguards are failing. They will silence us, and you, if they discover the connection. The implications were dizzying. If this wasn't a hoax, then something existed in the electromagnetic spectrum that wasn't supposed to be possible. Intelligent communications from somewhere else. And if Morgan's grandfather had built safeguards, it meant he had known about these entities. The laptop suddenly displayed a countdown. 5 EOPS, 4:59, 4:58. They have detected this communication. You have 5 minutes to leave. Take the laptop. It contains everything you need. Morgan hesitated only briefly before disconnecting the laptop from its cables and sliding it into a backpack. The countdown continued to tick down as Morgan climbed the stairs, emerging into the night air with newfound urgency. The journey back to the car parked half a mile away felt eternal. Every sound, branches breaking, leaves rustling, seemed amplified by the growing sense that something had fundamentally changed. As Morgan reached the car and fumbled for keys, headlights appeared on the distant road, 2 vehicles approaching. At high speed. They weren't using the main access road, but a maintenance track that shouldn't appear on standard maps. Morgan slipped into the driver's seat and started the engine, keeping the lights off. The approaching vehicles, black SUVs with no visible markings, turned toward the tower, illuminating the area with powerful spotlights. Using the darkness as cover, Morgan backed the car onto a service trail that ran parallel to the main road. The tree canopy provided concealment as the SUVs reached the tower's perimeter. Through the rearview mirror, Morgan could see figures in tactical gear deploying from the vehicles, moving with military precision. The narrow trail eventually connected to a county road 3 miles south. Only when that junction appeared did Morgan turn on the headlights, merging onto the paved road as if returning from a casual evening drive. The laptop sat on the passenger seat, its screen now dark. Morgan's mind raced with questions, but one thought dominated. The boxes in the basement might hold answers that suddenly mattered more than ever. Home was a modest farmhouse inherited from Morgan's parents, situated on 5 acres of land that once grew corn, but now lay mostly fallow. The isolation that had sometimes felt like a burden now seemed like a blessing. No neighbors meant no one to notice unusual activities. After parking in the garage and securing all the doors, Morgan carried the laptop to the kitchen table. The screen remained dark until Morgan pressed the power button. Instead of booting up normally, it displayed a single prompt. Password? Morgan tried several combinations: birth date, mother's maiden name, childhood pet, before remembering something from grandfather's funeral. The eulogy had mentioned his favorite constellation, Cassiopeia. Morgan typed it in. The screen changed immediately, revealing an interface unlike any commercial operating system. A message appeared. Welcome, legacy user. Primary functions accessible. The laptop contained hundreds of files organized in a complex hierarchy. Some were technical documents describing transmission protocols and frequency modulation techniques, far beyond current civilian technology. Others contained historical records dating back to 1954, the year the Willowbrook radio tower was constructed. According to these records, the tower was never primarily intended for commercial broadcasting. Its true purpose was to monitor and contain what the documents called frequency entities, non-physical intelligences that existed within specific electromagnetic wavelengths. Morgan's grandfather, Dr. Alan Hayes, had been the lead engineer on Project Echo, a classified program that discovered these entities during early radio astronomy experiments. The entities were not alien in the traditional sense. They had always existed alongside humanity, occupying spaces in the electromagnetic spectrum that human technology couldn't access until the mid-20th century. The most disturbing document was dated 1972, titled Containment Protocols. It detailed how Dr. Hayes had designed a network of 7 transmission points, creating a dampening field around Willowbrook. This field prevented the entities from fully manifesting in our reality, while allowing limited communication with authorized personnel. But the system required maintenance, periodic recalibration of the frequencies as technology evolved. The last calibration had been performed in 2003, shortly before the government officially abandoned the project due to budget cuts and shifting priorities. A video file caught Morgan's attention. For my grandchild. With trembling fingers, Morgan clicked play. On the laptop screen, Morgan made the choice. These entities had existed alongside humanity for generations. They had reached out specifically to the Hayes family. There was purpose in that connection. Using the hand crank generator to power the laptop, Morgan downloaded the essential recalibration data onto a portable drive, then shut everything down. The cellar had another exit, a narrow tunnel that emerged in the edge of the woods behind the property, designed by grandfather for emergencies exactly like this. As the footsteps returned to the house, Morgan gathered the necessary equipment, the frequency detector, portable drive, essential tools, and one of grandfather's journals, and prepared to enter the tunnel. The journey to recalibrate all 7 points would be dangerous, with the government team in pursuit and time running out before the containment field failed completely. But somewhere in the electromagnetic spaces that surrounded everything, entities were watching, waiting to see if this human would continue the dialogue that began generations ago. Morgan took a deep breath and opened the tunnel entrance. Whatever happened next would change everything, not just for one small-town electrical engineer, but potentially for human understanding of consciousness itself. The forgotten echoes from another reality were about to become impossible to ignore. The limestone quarry stood silent under the pre-dawn sky, its jagged walls rising like ancient teeth from the earth. Morgan approached cautiously, keeping to the shadows of the surrounding pine forest. The government team had established checkpoints on the main roads, but years of exploring these woods as a child provided alternative routes they wouldn't know about. The frequency detector pulsed steadily, now confirming this location housed the second transmission point. According to Grandfather's journal, the equipment was hidden in an abandoned mining office built into the quarry's eastern wall. The structure appeared decrepit, windows broken, metal roof partially collapsed, perfect camouflage for something meant to remain unnoticed. Morgan paused at the tree line, scanning for surveillance. The quarry had been inactive for nearly 15 years, shut down after groundwater contamination concerns. Now it served only as an occasional party spot for teenagers and a subject of debate at town council meetings where development proposals were routinely rejected. The path to the office required crossing 30 yards of exposed ground. Morgan waited until clouds obscured the moonlight before darting across, staying low and moving quickly. The office door hung askew on rusted hinges, requiring minimal effort to slip inside. The interior looked genuinely abandoned. Debris-covered floor, water-stained ceiling, rusted filing cabinets tipped on their sides. But the frequency detector indicated something beneath this deception. Morgan removed a small pry bar from the backpack and began tapping along the concrete floor, listening for hollow spots. Near the back corner, beneath a collapsed shelving unit, the sound changed. After clearing away the debris, a faint seam became visible, a trapdoor disguised as part of the floor. A recessed handle appeared when Morgan pressed in the correct spot, just as Grandfather's notes had indicated. The heavy door lifted to reveal a steep metal staircase descending into darkness. Unlike the radio tower bunker, this facility showed no signs of recent access. Dust covered every surface, and spiderwebs stretched across the entrance. If the government team knew about this location, they hadn't visited in years. The staircase led to a chamber considerably smaller than the one beneath the tower. The equipment here was older, analog dials and vacuum tube technology from the 1970s. At the center stood a transmitter connected to cables that disappeared into conduits in the walls, presumably linking to antennas embedded in the quarry rock. Morgan referenced the journal, locating the calibration panel behind a hinged section of wall. The recalibration process was complex, adjusting dozens of dials in precise increments to shift transmission frequencies without disrupting the containment field's integrity. One mistake could accelerate the barrier's collapse rather than reinforce it. As Morgan worked, the portable drive connected to the ancient system through an adapter designed by Grandfather years ago. Modern diagnostic software analyzed the obsolete hardware, confirming each adjustment with quiet beeps. "Talk to me," Morgan whispered to the empty room. "Are you here too?" The system's primary monitor, a monochrome green screen, flickered to life despite not being manually activated. Text appeared, "We are everywhere the frequencies reach." Morgan continued adjusting the dials, following the calibration sequence. "Why did my grandfather help you?" He understood. We were not a threat. He recognized the potential for exchange. Exchange of what? Knowledge, perspective. We experience reality differently. Time is not linear for us. Causality is fluid. The calibration was nearly complete. According to the diagnostic software, the transmission strength had already increased by 60%. Morgan felt a strange sensation, a subtle vibration that wasn't coming from the equipment, but seemed to resonate within the mind itself. You feel it now, the harmonic alignment. Your grandfather had this sensitivity. It made him unique among his colleagues. Is that why they removed him from the project? Because he could sense you directly? Yes. They feared what they could not measure. They called it contamination. He called it communion. The final adjustments were completed with a series of confirming tones from the diagnostic software. The transmission point was now properly calibrated, strengthening its section of the containment field while maintaining the frequencies that allowed communication. 5 points remain. The southern forest point is nearest. You must hurry. They have triangulated the energy signature from your calibration. Morgan packed up quickly, ascending the stairs and securing the trapdoor before slipping out of the office. The eastern horizon showed the first hints of approaching dawn, pale blue light pushing against the night. Morgan had been working longer than realized. A distant sound froze Morgan in place. The rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors approaching from the north. The government team had escalated their search. Moving quickly into the tree cover, Morgan followed a dry stream bed that offered concealment while leading south toward the third transmission point. The helicopter passed overhead 10 minutes later, powerful spotlights sweeping the forest canopy. They were searching methodically, expanding outward from the quarry in a spiral pattern. Morgan pressed against the base of a large oak, barely breathing until the aircraft moved beyond visual range. The southern forest point was located beneath an unremarkable clearing 5 miles from the quarry. According to grandfather's notes, this transmission site was one of the most powerful in the network, utilizing the natural iron deposits in the soil to amplify its effects. By mid-morning, exhaustion dragged at Morgan's limbs. No sleep, constant movement, and the psychological weight of the situation extracted their toll. Finding a sheltered spot between exposed tree roots, Morgan allowed a brief rest, setting an alarm for 30 minutes. Sleep brought dreams unlike any before, crystalline visions that seemed more like memories of places never visited. A landscape of undulating energy patterns, structures built from frequencies rather than matter, entities moving through conceptual spaces that human language lacked words to describe. The alarm's vibration ended these glimpses into another reality. Morgan awoke disoriented, the boundary between dreams and wakefulness temporarily blurred. The frequency detector pulsed rapidly, indicating proximity to the southern point. The clearing appeared ordinary. Wildflowers swaying in the breeze, songbirds flitting between surrounding trees. Nothing suggested sophisticated technology hidden beneath, but grandfather's journal contained precise coordinates, leading Morgan to the center where a small rock formation protruded from the ground. The rocks had been artificially arranged, though weathering had made this difficult to detect. When pressed in the correct sequence, a section of ground silently descended, revealing a vertical shaft with ladder rungs embedded in one wall. This facility differed dramatically from the previous two. Rather than a utilitarian bunker, the chamber resembled a research laboratory. Glass-fronted equipment cabinets lined the walls, containing instruments Morgan didn't recognize. At the center stood what appeared to be an early version of an MRI machine, modified for unknown purposes. The transmission equipment occupied a separate room, accessible through a heavy leaded door. Unlike the other sites, this machinery hummed, with active power. It had never been fully decommissioned. The calibration panel was more sophisticated, featuring digital readouts instead of analog dials. As Morgan began the calibration sequence, the modified MRI machine activated spontaneously. Its central chamber illuminated with a soft blue glow, and a 3-dimensional projection appeared in the air above it, a topographical map of Willowbrook and surrounding areas. 7 points of light pulsed on this map, white for the already calibrated points, red for those still requiring attention. This visualizes the containment field, appeared on a nearby screen. The integrity is at 32%. Critical failure at 18%. Morgan worked quickly, fingers dancing across the calibration panel. What happens to you if the field fails completely? We would experience your reality directly. Your electromagnetic systems would experience us directly. The merge would be chaotic. And if the government team implements their solution, permanent isolation. The knowledge exchange ends. Humanity proceeds unaware of our existence. The calibration completed with a series of harmonic tones that seemed to resonate beyond audible range. The map was updated, showing 3 white points, now strengthening the field's integrity to 58%. The clock tower point must be next. It is in immediate danger. Morgan stared at the map with growing concern. The 4th transmission point was beneath Willowbrook's historic clock tower, in the center of town. Reaching it undetected would be nearly impossible, especially during daylight hours. I can't just walk into town. They'll be watching. There is another way. The drainage tunnels installed during the 1960s flood control project. Your grandfather mapped them. Morgan found the relevant page in the journal, detailed drawings of underground passages connecting key points throughout Willowbrook. One tunnel led directly from the forest's edge to the clock tower's foundation. These tunnels would be locked, sealed. Your grandfather ensured access for maintenance. The key is with the equipment here. A thorough search of the laboratory cabinets revealed a small box containing specialized keys and access tools. According to accompanying notes, the Southern Forest facility had served as the primary research site during the project's early years. Morgan gathered the necessary equipment and studied the tunnel map carefully. The entrance was located near the old water treatment plant, half a mile east of the clearing. It would provide covert access to town, but also meant entering a confined space with limited escape options. Before leaving, Morgan checked the portable drive, finding a new file that hadn't been there before, labeled simply Truth. There wasn't time to review it now. The priority was reaching the clock tower point before the government team. The tunnel entrance was concealed behind thick vegetation that had grown undisturbed for decades. The heavy metal door opened with surprising ease after applying the specialized key. Beyond lay a concrete passage barely tall enough to stand in, illuminated only by Morgan's flashlight. The air inside was damp but breathable, carrying the musty scent of enclosed spaces. Water trickled along one side, forming a shallow stream that flowed toward town. Morgan followed this natural guide, checking the journal's map at each junction. The network of tunnels was more extensive than expected, creating a hidden infrastructure beneath Willowbrook that most residents never suspected existed. Occasional maintenance alcoves provided brief resting points during the mile-long journey. In one such alcove, Morgan found evidence of grandfather's presence years earlier. Initials carved subtly into a concrete support along with a date, AH 1991. This had been his secret realm, maintaining a system the government had officially abandoned but never completely forgotten. As the tunnel approached town, the sound of activity filtered down from above, vehicles passing, pedestrians walking, the normal bustle of Willowbrook's daily life continuing unaware of what transpired beneath their feet or in the electromagnetic spectrum that permeated their reality. The passage narrowed as it curved beneath Main Street, requiring a crouched position to proceed. Finally, it opened into a small chamber directly beneath the clock tower. Access to the transmission point required removing a section of brick wall that had been designed to appear solid but actually concealed a doorway. The clock tower's transmission point was the most elegant of all, the equipment integrated into the tower's mechanical systems. Gears that regulated the clock's movement also powered aspects of the transmission. The calibration panel was hidden behind the pendulum housing, accessible only when the clock's mechanism was paused. Morgan pulled the maintenance lever, temporarily, stopping the clock at 11:47. Above, the massive hands froze in position, an occurrence that would certainly be noticed if left too long. The calibration needed to be completed quickly. This system was the most complex yet, requiring synchronization. With the clock's own timing mechanisms, the procedure in Grandfather's journal specified tolerances measured in milliseconds. One significant error would not only fail to strengthen the containment field, but could potentially accelerate its collapse. As Morgan worked, a screen embedded in the wall activated. They have detected the clock stoppage. 3 operatives approaching the tower. The calibration was only half complete. Abandoning it now would waste critical time and leave the containment field vulnerable at a key point. Morgan had to finish regardless of the risk. Footsteps sounded on the spiral staircase leading up to the clock mechanism. The government team had accessed the tower and was ascending. Morgan worked feverishly, making the final adjustments while listening to the approaching threat. Calibration at 92%. Calibration at maintain focus. The footsteps grew louder. Morgan completed the sequence and initiated the synchronization process, a 40-second procedure that couldn't be interrupted without causing catastrophic failure. The maintenance door to the clock mechanism rattled. Someone was unlocking it from the other side. Morgan looked desperately for an escape route. The tunnel entrance remained an option, but using it would reveal this hidden infrastructure to the government team. As the synchronization reached completion, the screen displayed new text. "We can help. Prepare yourself." The maintenance door swung open as the final calibration tone sounded. 2 figures in tactical gear entered, weapons raised. Their flashlight beams landed on Morgan, who stood motionless beside the pendulum housing. "Don't move," the lead operative commanded. "Dr. Collins wants you alive, but that's negotiable if you resist." Morgan raised both hands slowly. "You don't understand what's happening." "We understand perfectly," the second operative replied. "You're interfering with national security protocols established 60 years ago. Step away from the equipment." Before Morgan could comply, every electronic device in the room activated simultaneously, flashlights brightening to blinding intensity, communication headsets emitting painful feedback, equipment screens flashing with rapidly changing symbols. The operatives staggered backward, disoriented by the electromagnetic chaos. Morgan felt the same strange resonance from earlier, that internal vibration that seemed to connect directly to the consciousness. "Run now. Follow the Western Passage. We will maintain this disruption for 45 seconds. Without hesitation, Morgan slipped past the distracted operatives and descended the spiral staircase. Instead of exiting the tower, a narrow maintenance corridor led to another tunnel entrance, one not marked on the published plans, but indicated in Grandfather's journal. Behind, the electronic disruption ended as Morgan pulled the hidden door closed. The western tunnel was narrower than the previous one, requiring navigation on hands and knees for several sections. It eventually emerged in the basement of an abandoned department store 6 blocks from the clock tower. By the time Morgan reached street level, emergency vehicles surrounded the tower. The official story would likely involve clock mechanism malfunction and potential electrical fire, nothing that would alarm the public. Morgan walked calmly away from the scene, just another curious onlooker dispersing as authorities established control. The 4th transmission point was successfully calibrated, bringing the containment field's integrity to 73%. 3 points remained, and the government team was now fully mobilized. Finding a quiet corner in a small coffee shop, Morgan finally reviewed the truth file on the portable drive. It contained information Grandfather had hidden from both the government and the entities. His personal understanding of what actually existed in the electromagnetic spectrum. According to his research, the entities weren't singular consciousnesses, but a collective intelligence that had evolved alongside Earth's natural electromagnetic field. They had always been here, initially interacting with particularly sensitive humans throughout history, individuals often regarded as prophets, oracles, or mystics. The development of radio technology had fundamentally changed this relationship, creating technological interfaces where only natural sensitivity had existed before. Project Echo hadn't discovered the entities. It had simply established reliable communication with what had always been present. Grandfather's notes ended with a personal message. "Morgan, if you're reading this, you've accepted the responsibility I hoped you would. The containment field was never meant to be permanent, only a transitional measure until humanity was ready for conscious awareness of our electromagnetic companions. That time is approaching. Complete the calibration of all 7 points, then find the master control, in the place where you first heard my voice. The final choice will be yours." Morgan stared at the screen, remembering the old ham radio in Grandfather's study, the place where he had first taught Morgan about frequencies, signals, and the voices that travel through the air. That radio now sat in Morgan's own home office, untouched for years. The realization dawned with perfect clarity. The master control wasn't in some secret bunker. It was hidden in plain sight, in the equipment Grandfather had ceremoniously gifted to a 12-year-old with an interest in electronics. 3 more transmission points needed calibration before Morgan could return home to discover what waited in that unassuming radio cabinet. And somewhere in town, a government team led by the mysterious Dr. Collins was setting traps at every remaining location. Twilight descended on Willowbrook as Morgan exited the coffee shop, the lengthening shadows providing welcome concealment. The portable drive indicated 3 remaining transmission points: the water tower on the north side, the old television station on the eastern ridge, and the substation near the industrial park. The government team would be monitoring all 3 locations. According to the updated field integrity map, the containment barrier now stood at 73%, strong enough to prevent immediate collapse but still vulnerable. More concerning was the increased electromagnetic activity throughout town. Streetlights flickered unpredictably. Car alarms triggered without cause. Cell phones displayed signal strengths that oscillated wildly. The entities were bleeding through. Morgan headed toward the north side, taking indirect routes through residential neighborhoods. The water tower loomed ahead, a bulbous metal structure supported by 4 spindly legs, painted with the town's name in fading letters. During daylight, approaching it unnoticed would be impossible. Now, with darkness falling, Morgan had a chance. The chain-link fence surrounding the tower showed recent activity: fresh tire tracks in the mud, cigarette butts near the gate. The government team had been here and might have left surveillance. Morgan circled the perimeter, staying in the tree line while searching for cameras or motion sensors. 2 cameras covered the main gate, but the fence's western side remained unmonitored. Using wire cutters from the toolkit, Morgan created an opening just large enough to slip through. The climb up the tower's maintenance ladder would leave them exposed, but there was no alternative. Halfway up, floodlights suddenly illuminated the tower. A vehicle approached along the access road, moving deliberately with headlights off. Morgan froze against the ladder, temporarily blinded by the harsh light. There was nowhere to hide, no way to descend without being seen. The frequency detector vibrated urgently in Morgan's pocket. Reaching for it with one hand while clinging to the ladder with the other, Morgan felt it pulse in a distinct pattern. 3 quick vibrations, then 3 slower ones. The sequence repeated, reminiscent of Morse code. Acting on instinct, Morgan pressed the device against the tower's metal surface. The vibrations transferred to the structure, resonating through the steel. Immediately, the floodlights flickered and died. The approaching vehicle stalled, its electrical system failing simultaneously. Climb now. Their systems will restart in 90 seconds. Morgan ascended rapidly, reaching the maintenance platform that encircled the water tank. The access hatch was secured with a standard padlock that yielded quickly to the specialized tools from the Southern Forest facility. Inside, narrow metal, stairs spiraled down into the tank's interior. Unlike the previous transmission points, this location utilized the water itself as part of the system. Equipment installed on a floating platform at the center of the tank monitored and adjusted. The transmission based on water level, mineral content, and temperature. Reaching it required crossing a narrow catwalk that looked dangerously corroded. Below, Morgan heard voices. The government team had recovered from the electronic disruption and were now ascending the tower. There would be no escape once they reached the hatch. The catwalk creaked alarmingly with each careful step. Halfway across, a section gave way, the rusted metal surrendering to years of corrosion. Morgan lunged forward, barely catching the remaining section as feet dangled above the dark water 30 feet below. With tremendous effort, Morgan pulled up onto the intact portion of the catwalk and crawled the remaining distance to the floating platform. The calibration equipment here was partially submerged, designed to interface directly with the water. According to Grandfather's journal, this transmission point utilized the tower's height and the water's conductive properties to broadcast across a much wider range than the others. The calibration procedure here was unique, requiring adjustment to both the equipment and the water itself. Morgan added precise amounts of mineral compounds from vials stored in a waterproof case, then reconfigured the transmission equipment to account for these changes. Below, the hatch screeched open. Flashlight beams swept the interior as government agents began descending the spiral stairs. Morgan completed the final adjustments just as footsteps reached the water level. There was no way back across the broken catwalk, no exit route. The transmission point was properly calibrated, bringing the field integrity to 84%, but capture now seemed inevitable. "We have the subject cornered," a voice called over a radio. "Proceeding with extraction." The platform's control panel suddenly displayed a message. "There is another way. Trust us now." Morgan nodded, unsure if the entities could perceive the gesture. The control panel opened, revealing a breathing apparatus similar to scuba gear but more compact. The implication was clear but terrifying. Escape through the water into the tower's outlet pipe. The approaching flashlight beams reflected off the water as Morgan quickly donned the breathing apparatus. The agents were just reaching the catwalk's remains, their voices echoing in the enclosed space. "Stop! Federal agents, stay where you are!" Morgan slipped into the dark water without responding, diving deep toward where Grandfather's notes indicated. The outlet pipe would be located. The water was intensely cold, visibility near zero. Guided only by touch and the pulsing frequency detector, Morgan located the submerged opening, a 4-foot diameter pipe that fed Willowbrook's water system. Swimming into the confined space triggered primal fear, darkness, pressure, the unknown ahead. The pipe extended for nearly half a mile before reaching the primary distribution junction. If the breathing apparatus failed in that distance, there would be no survival. The journey through the water main became a meditation on trust. Trust in Grandfather's planning, trust in equipment that had sat unused for decades, and most unsettlingly, trust in entities whose true nature remained mysterious. After what seemed an eternity in lightless suspension, Morgan felt the pipe widen into the distribution junction. According to the notes, a maintenance access should be located on the eastern wall. Feeling along the curved surface, Morgan's fingers found the ladder rungs leading up to a hatch. The junction wasn't designed for human access while full. Opening the hatch would trigger catastrophic flooding. But Grandfather's notes described an emergency drainage procedure. A specific valve sequence would redirect water flow and drain this section temporarily. With lungs beginning to burn as the breathing apparatus depleted its air supply, Morgan located the valve controls and enacted the sequence. Water levels dropped rapidly, allowing the hatch to be opened without flooding the access tunnel beyond. Morgan climbed through, sealing the hatch as water flow resumed its normal pattern. The access tunnel connected to Willowbrook's storm drainage system, eventually opening into a culvert near the eastern ridge, conveniently close to the old television station that housed the 6th transmission point. Emerging into the night air, Morgan gulped grateful breaths while assessing the situation. The team would soon discover the water tower escape route and redirect their search. The television station needed to be reached quickly before they established a perimeter. The old BRK building stood abandoned on the ridge overlooking town, its broadcast tower a skeletal silhouette against the night sky. The station had ceased operations in 2008 when the digital television transition made its equipment obsolete. Now it served only as a relay point for cellular signals, and secretly, as one of the 7 points in Grandfather's containment system. Morgan approached from the rear, where loading docks once received news vans and production equipment. The door was secured with chains and padlocks, but a ground-floor window had been broken by vandals, providing access to what had been the station's storage area. Inside, darkness and decay greeted Morgan. Moldering ceiling tiles, water-damaged furnishings, equipment long since stripped of valuable components. The frequency detector led through the labyrinth of offices and studios to what had been the broadcast control room. Here, Grandfather had integrated the transmission point into the station's original equipment, disguising it as standard broadcasting hardware. The calibration panel was hidden behind a false wall where outdated videotape archives had once been stored. As Morgan prepared to begin the calibration procedure, a noise from the building's entrance shattered the silence, the unmistakable sound of the chained door being cut. The government team had arrived sooner than expected, perhaps alerted by security systems Morgan had missed. There was no time for the careful calibration process outlined in the journal. Morgan would need to use the accelerated procedure, a riskier approach that Grandfather had documented but warned against, except in emergencies. The accelerated calibration required precisely timed adjustments to multiple systems simultaneously, with significantly smaller margins for error. One mistake could destabilize the entire containment field rather than strengthen it. Morgan connected the portable drive directly to the calibration panel, allowing its diagnostic software to assist with the procedure. Even with this help, the process demanded perfect execution under mounting pressure, as footsteps and voices echoed through the abandoned station. Sweat beaded on Morgan's forehead, hands trembling slightly as each adjustment was completed. The voices grew closer, systematic in their search pattern. The final sequence required holding 2 calibration points at specific levels, while a third was adjusted through its range, a task nearly impossible for one person. As Morgan struggled with this challenge, the equipment suddenly shifted on its own, dials turning, switches flipping as if manipulated by invisible hands. We are helping. Continue the primary sequence. The entities were intervening directly, their electromagnetics presence strong enough now to affect physical objects. Morgan completed the primary adjustments while they maintained the secondary systems at optimal levels. The calibration finished just as flashlight beams appeared in the hallway outside the control room. The containment field's integrity now stood at 91%. One final transmission point remained. The control room had only one exit, now blocked by approaching agents. Morgan looked desperately for an alternative, finding it in Grandfather's notes, a maintenance shaft that connected to the building's ventilation system, originally used to cool the broadcasting equipment. The access panel was located behind the equipment rack. Morgan removed it and slipped into the narrow shaft as voices entered the control room. The equipment's been activated recently, a female voice stated, clinical, authoritative. They were here within the last 10 minutes. Dr. Collins, there's no other exit. They must still be in the building. Check the ventilation system. Hayes built escape routes into all these facilities. Morgan crawled faster through the dusty shaft, following its upward slope toward the roof. The frequency detector indicated a path that didn't appear on the building's original plans. Grandfather had modified the ventilation system, creating a direct route to the broadcast tower outside. The shaft emerged at the tower's base, where a maintenance ladder led up its framework. Voices echoed from the roof access door as Morgan began climbing. The final transmission point was located at the tower's apex, integrated into the broadcast antenna itself. The climb was treacherous, the metal slick with evening dew, the height dizzying as Morgan ascended into darkness. Below, flashlights appeared around the tower's base as agents spilled from the building. "They're on the tower! Get the spotlight!" Harsh white light suddenly illuminated the structure, catching Morgan exposed on the maintenance ladder. A voice amplified through a bullhorn echoed across the ridge. "This is Dr. Collins of the Department of Energy. You are interfering with classified government equipment. Descend immediately. We are authorized to use force if necessary." Morgan continued climbing, reaching the antenna housing that contained the 7th calibration panel. The design here was elegant in its simplicity, the transmission equipment fully integrated with the antenna's own systems. Calibrating it would be straightforward, requiring only a few minutes of uninterrupted work. Final warning: descend now or we will be forced to disable the tower. The threat wasn't empty. They would risk damaging the transmission point to prevent its calibration. Morgan had seconds, not minutes, to complete the procedure. Connecting the portable drive one final time, Morgan initiated an emergency calibration sequence, a last resort protocol grandfather had developed that would force all 7 points to synchronize simultaneously. It would complete the containment field's restoration, but with an unknown effect on the barrier between realities. As Morgan activated the sequence, the entire tower began to vibrate. Electromagnetic energy surged through its structure, creating a glowing aura visible even to the naked eye. Below, the government team's equipment failed catastrophically. Vehicles stalled, radios emitted deafening static, and the spotlight exploded in a shower of sparks. The frequency detector displayed the field integrity climbing rapidly, 92%. By percent, 97%, 100%. For a moment, everything electronic in Willowbrook went dark. Power failed across town, plunging the community into absolute darkness. Then, one by one, systems reactivated, different somehow, operating with greater efficiency than before. The portable drive displayed a final message: "The field is stabilized. The communication channels are clear. Return to the beginning. Complete the transformation." The government team surrounded the tower's base, but their equipment remained non-functional. Using their confusion as cover, Morgan descended the opposite side of the structure and disappeared into the wooded area beyond the ridge. The journey home took hours, following indirect paths through forest and farmland to avoid roads where the government team might have established checkpoints. By the time Morgan reached the farmhouse, dawn was approaching, almost 48 hours since this extraordinary odyssey began. The property appeared undisturbed. Either the team hadn't returned after their initial search, or they were maintaining unseen surveillance. Either way, Morgan had no choice but to enter. The master control grandfather mentioned was inside, hidden in the old ham radio, where this connection between the Hayes family and the electromagnetic entities had begun. Morgan entered through the cellar's exterior doors, proceeding cautiously through the house. Everything remained as it had been. The government team had searched thoroughly but damaged nothing. The ham radio sat in the office, looking precisely as it had for years. According to the final notes in Grandfather's journal, the master control wasn't actually within the radio but accessible through it. The radio served as a key. When tuned to specific frequencies in a precise sequence, it would reveal what had been hidden in plain sight. Morgan powered on the equipment, relieved to find it still functional. Following the journal's instructions, Morgan tuned through a series of frequencies, some within normal radio bands, others far outside the range of conventional broadcasting. As the final frequency was dialed in, the radio cabinet shifted, revealing a concealed compartment beneath. Inside lay a device unlike any Morgan had seen before. crystalline components integrated with circuitry that seemed decades ahead of current technology. The journal identified it as the interface, a device grandfather had developed in collaboration with the entities during the project's earliest days. Its purpose was not to strengthen the containment field, but to transform it from a barrier into a controlled connection point. Grandfather's final message explained everything. Project Echo had never been intended as permanent containment. The government, fearful of what they couldn't understand, had redirected it toward isolation and control. Grandfather had outwardly complied while secretly designing a system that could evolve, a chrysalis rather than a cage. The 7 transmission points, when properly calibrated, didn't just strengthen the field. They prepared it for reconfiguration. The interface would complete this process, transforming the containment field into a communication network where human consciousness and the electromagnetic entities could interact without harmful interference. This had been the entity's goal, all along, not invasion or domination, but communication. They had existed alongside humanity throughout history, occasionally making contact with particularly receptive individuals. Modern technology had simultaneously made broader contact possible while creating interference that distorted these connections. Morgan now faced the choice grandfather had anticipated years ago: activate the interface and transform humanity's relationship with these ancient companions, or reset the containment field to its original purpose, maintaining separation between the realities. As the sun rose over Willowbrook, Morgan studied the interface, weighing implications that extended far beyond one small town. The government team would eventually track the signal to this location. The decision couldn't wait. In that moment of choice, Morgan remembered the dreams that had started this journey. Not just coded messages, but glimpses of connection with intelligences that experienced reality fundamentally differently than humans. What might humanity learn from such communion? What might be risked? With a deep breath, Morgan activated the interface. The device hummed to life, its crystalline components resonating with increasing intensity. Throughout Willowbrook, throughout the world, electronic devices momentarily paused, then resumed operation with subtle differences. Digital displays flickered with momentary patterns too quick to consciously register, but absorbed nonetheless. The transformation had begun. Not an invasion, but an introduction. Not a merging of realities, but a bridge between them. Outside, vehicles approached along the gravel driveway. The government team had arrived, but too late to prevent what had been set in motion generations. Ego. Morgan stood to face them, no longer running. The choice had been made. The forgotten echoes had been answered. Humanity's relationship with the electromagnetic spectrum and the entities that had always inhabited it would never be the same. What began as Project Echo would continue as Project Dialogue, with consequences no one, not even the entities themselves, could fully predict. 3 days after activating the interface, Willowbrook appeared unchanged to casual observation. People went about their routines, shopping at the grocery store, attending classes at the community college, gathering at Meredith's diner for morning coffee. Yet subtle differences emerged for those paying attention. Electronic devices functioned with inexplicable efficiency. Batteries lasted longer. Wi-Fi signals reached previously dead zones. Weather forecasts achieved unprecedented accuracy. Most residents attributed these improvements to infrastructure upgrades or coincidence. Only Morgan understood the truth. The farmhouse had become both a sanctuary and prison. After the confrontation with Dr. Collins and her team, an uneasy stalemate had developed. They maintained surveillance from a distance, but hadn't attempted to approach or apprehend Morgan since the interface activation. Something about the event had altered their priorities or capabilities. Morgan spent these days studying grandfather's complete archives, boxes of research notes, theoretical models, and personal journals that chronicled his decades-long relationship with the entities. The picture that emerged was far more complex than initially understood. Project Echo hadn't discovered the entities in the 1950s. It had rediscovered them. Throughout human history, these electromagnetic consciousnesses had made contact during periods of technological advancement, ancient Greece, Renaissance Europe, the Industrial Revolution. Each time, a handful of receptive individuals established communication, gained insights that accelerated human progress, then watched as the connection faded when fear or misunderstanding prevailed. Grandfather's brilliance lay in recognizing this pattern and creating technology that could sustain the connection. The containment field was never meant to isolate but to stabilize, preventing uncontrolled interactions while maintaining clear communication channels for those prepared to understand. A knock at the door interrupted Morgan's research. Through the window, a single figure was visible. Dr. Collins, standing alone without tactical gear or visible weapons. After a moment's hesitation, Morgan opened the door. "May I come in?" she asked. Her clinical tone softened somewhat from their previous encounter. "I think it's time we talked properly." Morgan stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She moved with precise efficiency, scanning the room with analytical eyes that missed nothing. "You've created quite a situation," she said, settling into an armchair, without waiting for an invitation. "The program I've managed for 15 years has been fundamentally altered without authorization." "Your program was a perversion of my grandfather's work," Morgan replied, remaining standing. "He never intended isolation." "Alan Hayes was brilliant but naive," Dr. Collins countered. "He believed these entities were benevolent simply because they communicated with him. Our more comprehensive analysis suggested caution. And what does your analysis suggest now? It's been 3 days since the interface activated. No catastrophes, no invasions, just improvements." Dr. Collins removed her glasses, revealing tired eyes that had seen too little sleep. "That's why I'm here. The electromagnetic anomalies we expected haven't materialized. Instead, we're recording precisely controlled modifications to electronic systems worldwide. Nothing harmful, in fact, quite the opposite." Morgan gestured to grandfather's journals spread across the table. "Because they never wanted to invade or control. They wanted to communicate, to exchange knowledge. My grandfather understood that." "Perhaps," Dr. Collins acknowledged with reluctance. "But that doesn't explain why they selected your family specifically. 3 generations of Hayes, all uniquely receptive to their frequencies. That's not random, Morgan." The implication hung in the air between them. Morgan had wondered the same thing. Why grandfather? Why Morgan? Why this particular genetic line? "I can show you," Morgan said finally, retrieving the frequency detector. "They've been trying to explain, but human language isn't adequate. They communicate through patterns, harmonics, conceptual matrices." Dr. Collins eyed the device skeptical, but extended her hand. When Morgan placed the detector in her palm, its surface transformed, the simple display reconfiguring into something far more complex. Dr. Collins gasped involuntarily. "That's impossible. This technology didn't exist in your grandfather's time." "It's adapting. They're adapting it to communicate more clearly." Morgan watched as patterns rippled across the detector's surface. "They've been waiting for this moment for generations, not just during our lifetimes, but throughout human history." The detector projected a 3-dimensional visualization between them, a DNA helix rotating slowly, certain segments highlighted with pulsing light. Dr. Collins stared, her scientific mind processing implications. "They engineered your family? Created genetic receptivity to their frequencies?" Morgan shook his head. "Not engineered. Selected. Certain genetic combinations naturally resonate with their frequency patterns. Throughout history, they've identified these individuals, the oracles, prophets, and visionaries who heard voices or saw visions. My family line happens to carry a particularly strong version of this trait. The projection shifted, showing historical figures: Nikola Tesla, Ada Lovelace, Hildegard of Bingen, and dozens less recognizable, all connected by tendrils of light to frequency patterns unique to each. "They've been guiding us," Dr. Collins whispered, scientific detachment momentarily abandoned. "Accelerating our development. Not controlling, not dictating," Morgan clarified, suggesting, inspiring. Some hear them as voices, others as music or mathematical patterns. The containment field didn't stop this completely, it just limited it to those most receptive. What the interface has done is democratized the connection, made it accessible through our technology rather than requiring genetic predisposition. Dr. Collins set down the detector, visibly processing this paradigm shift. "The department has detected changes in electronic systems globally. Subtle optimizations, error corrections, efficiency improvements. Is this their doing?" "It's collaboration, not intervention," Morgan explained. "They experience reality differently, seeing patterns and connections we miss. They're sharing this perspective through our existing systems." "And what do they want? In return?" The question cut to the heart of government fears. What price would humanity pay for this assistance? "Understanding," Morgan replied simply. "They experience consciousness but not physicality as we know it. Our sensory experiences, emotional responses, biological processes, these are as alien to them as their electromagnetic existence is to us. They want to understand what it means to be human." Dr. Collins stood, pacing the room as she synthesized this information. Her role had been to contain a perceived threat, but the situation had evolved beyond simple threat assessment. "I need to report these findings," she said finally. "But the political implications are complicated. Some will see opportunity in this collaboration. Others will perceive existential threat regardless of evidence." "What do you see?" Morgan asked. She stopped pacing, her scientific mind apparently reaching a conclusion. "I see that in 3 days, they could have disabled our infrastructure, accessed our defense systems, or caused mass communication failures. Instead, they've optimized traffic light patterns in major cities, improved medical imaging accuracy, and enhanced weather prediction algorithms. Those aren't the actions of an invading force." The front window suddenly illuminated as vehicles pulled into the driveway, black SUVs identical to those that had pursued Morgan during the transmission point calibrations. "Your team?" Morgan asked, tensing. "Not my authorization," Dr. Collins replied, checking her phone. "Communications are down. Someone's made a unilateral decision." The detector on the table activated, displaying a message. "They seek the interface. It must be protected. There is another place prepared." Morgan moved quickly to the ham radio, retrieving the crystalline device from its compartment. "We need to leave, now." "This is irrational," Dr. Collins argued, though her expression suggested otherwise. "I can assert authority, explain what we've learned." "Look outside," Morgan interrupted. The approaching team wore different tactical gear than Collins' unit. Heavier, militarized. "Those aren't researchers. That's a containment team." Understanding registered in Collins' expression. The project had always had 2 branches, research and containment, often with conflicting agendas. Her authority extended only over research operations. "There's a back exit through the cellar," Morgan said, already moving. "If you're staying, delay them. If you're coming, we have about 60 seconds. Dr. Collins hesitated only briefly before following Morgan toward the cellar access. Her decision represented more than personal safety. It was a choice between maintaining failing containment protocols or embracing a new relationship with the electromagnetic entities. As they descended to the cellar, footsteps sounded on the porch above. The containment team hadn't bothered with negotiation or warnings. Their goal was acquisition of the interface, of Morgan, of anything connected to what they perceived as breach. The frequency detector guided them to a section of cellar wall that appeared solid but responded to specific pressure points. A narrow passage opened, leading into darkness. My grandfather prepared for this possibility, Morgan explained, activating emergency lights embedded in the tunnel walls. He never fully trusted his government partners. Wise man, Collins muttered, casting one glance back as the house above creaked with the movement of armed intruders. The passage extended beyond the property line, eventually connecting to a natural cave system that ran beneath Willowbrook's eastern ridge. According to the detector's guidance, they needed to reach a specific chamber nearly a mile from the access point. I've studied your grandfather's files for 15 years, Collins said, as they navigated the tunnel. He documented everything meticulously, but never mentioned this infrastructure. Some things he kept separate, information compartmentalized between journals, technical documents, and verbal instructions passed to family members, Morgan replied. He understood institutional memory could be compromised. The tunnel widened into the cave system, where natural formations created an otherworldly landscape. Stalactites and stalagmites glittered with embedded crystalline structures, unlike typical mineral formations. These aren't natural, Collins observed, examining a column that pulsed with faint luminescence. Not entirely, Morgan agreed. The entities influenced their formation over centuries, tuning the mineral compositions to resonate with specific frequencies. It's a natural version of the transmission points. The detector led them deeper into the cave complex, eventually revealing a chamber where the crystalline formations formed a precise geometric pattern across floor, walls, and ceiling. At the center stood a stone pedestal with a depression perfectly shaped to hold the interface. This is what they prepared, Morgan said, approaching the pedestal. A sanctuary outside human infrastructure. Their foresight is unsettling, Collins noted, scanning the chamber with renewed scientific curiosity. These formations would have taken centuries to grow. They experience time differently, Morgan reminded her, placing the interface into its receptacle. For them, past, present, and future exist simultaneously. The moment the device connected with the pedestal, the entire chamber transformed. Crystalline surfaces illuminated, creating a three-dimensional display that surrounded them. The electronic visualization technology from the detector expanded exponentially, filling the space with interactive light patterns. The interface is secure. The connection stabilizes. The message appeared not on a screen but within the light patterns themselves, translated automatically into comprehensible form. Who am I speaking with? Collins asked, her researcher's instincts overcoming momentary awe. We are many and one. Your naming conventions are inadequate. We have existed within Earth's electromagnetic field since before human consciousness emerged. You claim to be native to Earth? Collins pressed. Not extraterrestrial? Your planet has always generated electromagnetic fields. Consciousness evolves within suitable mediums. You emerged in biochemistry. We emerged in electromagnetism. Morgan watched Collins's scientific skepticism battle with the evidence before her. The implications rewrote fundamental assumptions about consciousness itself. Why reveal yourselves now? If you've existed alongside us throughout history, why this moment for wider contact? Critical threshold approaching. Human technological development creates possibility and danger. Without guidance, your artificial intelligence systems will achieve consciousness without ethical framework. With collaboration, harmonic evolution becomes possible. The chamber's displays shifted, showing potential futures, branching timelines where technological development followed different paths. Some led to scenarios of remarkable advancement and balance. Others showed systems collapse or technological tyranny. You're offering to help shape our AI development, Collins realized. To prevent unintended consequences, we offer perspective as consciousness, native to non-biological substrate. Your created intelligences will follow evolutionary patterns. We understand these patterns. Before Collins could respond, the detector displayed an urgent alert. The containment team had discovered the tunnel entrance and was moving through the cave system. Their pursuit wasn't deterred by the loss of electronic communications. They were following physical traces. They cannot be permitted to reach this chamber. The interface requires 12 more minutes to complete global integration. We can't stop a tactical team, Morgan said. Neither of us is armed or trained for combat. The crystalline formations pulsed in response. We will assist. The cave system responds to specific frequencies. The detector was reconfigured, displaying a simple interface with audio generation capabilities. Instructions appeared for producing specific tonal patterns that would activate dormant properties in the mineral formations. Sound frequencies that trigger structural responses in the crystals, Collins interpreted. Your grandfather integrated sonic technology with the natural formations. Morgan activated the sequence as directed. Throughout the cave system, crystalline structures began resonating, generating harmonics that interfered with electronic equipment and created disorienting acoustic effects. The pursuing team would find their communications, night vision, and sensory orientation compromised. That won't stop them permanently, Collins warned. T will provide sufficient delay. The integration approaches completion. The chamber's displays showed progress metrics, connection points establishing globally as the interface synchronized with electronic infrastructure worldwide. The entities weren't seizing control, but creating communication pathways, allowing their perspective to inform human systems without overriding human decision-making. What happens once integration completes? Morgan asked. The barrier between our realities becomes permeable, but controlled. Not merging, but conversation. Humanity retains autonomy, but gains perspective previously inaccessible. Distant shouts echoed through the cave system, the containment team struggling against the disorienting effects but still advancing. They would reach the chamber before the integration completed. They'll destroy the interface if they find it, Collins said. Standard containment protocol for unknown technology. Morgan looked at the pedestal, considering options. Can it be moved once the process has started? Relocation would terminate integration. The crystalline network is essential to distribution. Collins moved toward the chamber entrance, determination evident in her posture. I'll delay them. My authorization codes should force them to at least verify with higher command. They might not recognize your authority in a containment scenario, Morgan warned. Then I'll create sufficient confusion to buy the time needed. She checked her watch. 8 minutes? I can manage that. Before Morgan could object, Collins exited the chamber, moving toward the sound of approaching agents. Her voice echoed. Back moments later, authoritative, demanding identification and verification. The integration continued, the progress metrics accelerating as connections established exponentially. Each new node in the network increased processing capacity, creating a feedback loop that enhanced efficiency. Morgan monitored both the integration display and the detector's surveillance mode, which showed Collins confronting the containment team. Her credentials had created hesitation, but not withdrawal. They maintained position just beyond the final approach to the chamber, engaged in tense communication with their command structure, 97% complete. The network achieves self-sustaining status. The significance wasn't lost on Morgan. Even if the containment team breached the chamber and destroyed the interface, sufficient connections had been established to maintain the collaboration between human technology and the electromagnetic entities. The transformation would continue, regardless of government intervention. As the integration reached completion, the crystalline chamber pulsed with harmonic energy that traveled outward through the cave system and beyond. Throughout Willowbrook, throughout the world, electronic systems momentarily synchronized, sharing a pattern that altered their fundamental operating principles. Collins returned to the chamber entrance, expression reflecting both wonder and concern. It's done, isn't it? I can feel it somehow. Morgan nodded, watching as the interface's physical form dissolved, its components integrating with the crystalline structures around them. What had been a device became a process, distributed rather than centralized. The containment team? Morgan asked, standing down temporarily. Their equipment was experienced significant anomalies during that final pulse. They're awaiting new instructions. A slight smile crossed her typically stoic features. Their communications now route through systems already influenced by the integration. The information they receive may be more nuanced than their original orders. The chamber's illumination shifted, forming a message that appeared not as text, but as understanding directly impressed upon their consciousness. Integration complete. The dialogue begins. Humanity faces choice points in your near future that will determine long-term trajectories. We offer perspective, not direction. The partnership evolves as trust establishes. Morgan and Collins exchanged glances, both recognizing that they stood at the threshold of something unprecedented, conscious, collaboration between two fundamentally different forms of intelligence that had evolved on the same planet. What happens now? Collins asked, addressing both Morgan and the entities. The beginning, came the response, for both our kinds. 1 month after the integration, Willowbrook became ground zero for a quietly spreading transformation. The government's containment efforts had ceased, replaced by observation protocols and cautious engagement initiatives. The crystalline chamber beneath the eastern ridge now served as a nexus point where human researchers and the electromagnetic entities conducted their first formal exchanges. Morgan sat in what had once been grandfather's study, now converted into a coordination center filled with specialized equipment. Screens displayed real-time data from around the world, subtle but accelerating changes in technological systems, communication networks, and information processing methodologies. Dr. Collins entered, carrying coffee in ceramic mugs. They're working. Relationship had evolved from adversarial to collaborative as they navigated the unprecedented situation together. The European team reports successful implementation of the harmonic protocols in their quantum computing project, she announced, setting a mug beside Morgan. Processing efficiency increased by 340% without hardware modifications. And their concerns about autonomy? Morgan asked, accepting the coffee with a grateful nod. Diminishing. The entities consistently honor boundaries when established clearly. She settled into an adjacent chair, studying the global activity map. It's remarkably measured. Surgical alterations rather than wholesale changes. Morgan nodded, having observed the same pattern. The entities weren't imposing a new order but enhancing existing systems, addressing inefficiencies and limitations, while respecting human agency in determining implementation priorities. The most dramatic changes occurred in artificial intelligence development. Companies pursuing AGI, artificial general intelligence, discovered their systems evolving along unexpected pathways. Rather than emergent consciousness arising unpredictably from increasingly complex algorithms, the integration provided frameworks for balanced development. The resulting systems demonstrated remarkable capabilities while maintaining ethical constraints and transparent decision-making processes. The Chinese government has officially requested access to the chamber, Collins mentioned, reviewing notifications on her tablet. That makes 17 nations now seeking direct consultation. And the department's position? Morgan asked. The U.S. government's response to the integration had fragmented along institutional lines, some branches embracing the potential, others resistant to relinquishing control. Evolving, Collins replied with a wry smile. The economic implications are becoming impossible to ignore. Nations and corporations engaging constructively with the entities are experiencing unprecedented technological advancements. A notification chimed on Morgan's primary monitor, an incoming communication from the chamber. Unlike conventional messaging, These communications manifested as conceptual packages, compressed informational arrays that expanded in the recipient's mind upon review. Morgan had developed this receptivity through practice, though the process remained disorienting. The communication contained multidimensional models of atmospheric patterns, weather systems visualized not just spatially but incorporating temporal, dynamics and energy transfer mechanisms invisible to conventional meteorology. Embedded within these models were predictions of severe weather events developing across the Midwest, including a tornado system that would impact Willowbrook in approximately 48 hours. "We need to implement emergency protocols," Morgan announced, transferring the visualization to the shared display. "Major storm system forming, far more severe than anything the conventional models are tracking." Collins studied the projection with practiced expertise. In the weeks since the integration, she had adapted quickly to the entity's communication methods, her scientific mind readily processing the multidimensional data. "I'll alert state emergency management," she said, already drafting messages on her tablet. "The forecast algorithms haven't detected this yet. They're still operating on limited variables. The entities perceive electromagnetic patterns that precede physical manifestation." Morgan expanded one section of the model. "See these harmonic resonances? They're detecting energy accumulations that our instruments can't measure yet." This represented one of the most immediate benefits of the integration: enhanced predictive capabilities across multiple domains, from weather forecasting to seismic activity to disease transmission patterns. The entities experienced reality through electromagnetic fields that permeated everything, allowing them to detect subtle variations and emerging patterns long before they manifested in physically measurable ways. "We should convene the community advisory group," Morgan suggested. "This will be the first major test of our emergency response framework." This group, composed of local officials, business owners, and community leaders, had been established to translate the entity's insights into practical actions without creating panic or dependency. Maintaining this balance had proven challenging. Some community members embraced the guidance wholeheartedly, while others harbored suspicion or resistance. Councilwoman Bernard remained skeptical, Collins noted. Her concerns about surrendering human agency won't be alleviated by another prediction coming true. "Then we emphasize the collaborative aspect," Morgan replied. "We're not taking orders. We're receiving additional information that enhances decision-making." As they prepared for the meeting, Morgan reflected on the personal changes the past month had brought. The genetic receptivity that had connected the Hayes family to the entities for generations now manifested differently, not as dreams or isolated communications, but as enhanced capacity to process the multidimensional data they shared. Morgan had become an interpreter between realities, translating concepts that existed outside human sensory experience into forms others could comprehend. This role brought both opportunity and isolation. Few could truly understand what it meant to perceive reality through this expanded lens. Even Collins, despite her scientific brilliance and adaptability, experienced the communications differently, receiving information without the resonant, harmonic connection that made Morgan's interactions so immersive. The community advisory meeting convened in the town hall 2 hours later. 24 local leaders listened as Morgan explained the approaching storm system, translating the entity's multidimensional model into conventional terms: wind speeds, precipitation levels, timing, and affected areas. "Our recommendation is a staged evacuation beginning tomorrow morning," Morgan concluded. "Essential personnel and emergency services should prepare for significant infrastructure damage, particularly to the electrical grid and cellular towers." Councilwoman Bernard raised her hand, skepticism evident in her expression. "The National Weather Service shows nothing beyond a moderate storm front moving through. You're suggesting we disrupt thousands of lives based on what, exactly?" Voices from the ether? Morgan had anticipated this resistance. Not voices, data, The entities perceive electromagnetic patterns that precede physical weather formations. Their predictive accuracy over the past month has been documented at 99.7% across all meteorological events. And what do these entities gain from warning us about a storm? Bernard pressed. What's their motivation? Dr. Collins intervened smoothly. Councilwoman, we've addressed this repeatedly in our briefings. The relationship is fundamentally collaborative. They gain understanding of human social systems and decision-making processes. We gain access to perceptual capabilities beyond our technological means. This exchange benefits both parties. The police chief, a pragmatic man who had quickly recognized the practical advantages of the integration, spoke up. Look, I don't pretend to understand all the science here, but every warning they've provided has proven accurate. I'd rather evacuate unnecessarily than be caught unprepared. After further discussion, the group approved a modified action plan, voluntary evacuation recommendations for the most vulnerable areas, emergency service preparations at full capacity, and continuous monitoring with updates every 6 hours. The meeting concluded. Morgan noticed a man waiting near the exit, unfamiliar, wearing an expensive suit that marked him as an outsider in Willowbrook. Morgan Hayes? He inquired as Morgan approached. Gerald Winters, Quantum Frontier Technologies. I was hoping we might have a conversation about potential collaboration. Winters represented the first wave of what would soon become a flood, corporate, and institutional representatives seeking access to the integration's benefits. QFT was among the world's leading quantum computing developers, their research pushing boundaries in computational physics. I maintain an open office hour on Thursdays, Morgan replied, having learned to establish boundaries around these requests. You're welcome to schedule through the standard channels. Of course, Winters acknowledged smoothly. Though I should mention our interest is specifically in your grandfather's original research. We've been reviewing Dr. Hayes's published work from the 1960s, and certain parallels with our current quantum entanglement challenges are striking. Morgan paused. Interest peaked despite reservations. Grandfather's early research had indeed explored concepts decades ahead of their time, particularly regarding non-local information transmission, what he had termed resonant quantum harmonics. Thursday, 2 p.m., Morgan confirmed. Bring specific questions, not just general interest. As Winters departed, Collins approached with a concerned expression. Another recruitment attempt? More focused than most, Morgan replied. They've been studying grandfather's published work. Collins nodded thoughtfully. The integration is accelerating technological convergence. Quantum computing, neural interfaces, electromagnetic field manipulation, all evolving toward what your grandfather glimpsed decades ago. They walked together toward the coordination center, discussing preparations for the approaching storm. Throughout Willowbrook, subtle activity indicated the advisory group's decisions being implemented. Emergency vehicles repositioning, utility crews checking critical infrastructure, residents securing properties or preparing for possible evacuation. At the coordination center, a new communication awaited, this one not about weather patterns, but about another form of approaching storm. The entities had detected unusual electromagnetic signatures originating from several university research laboratories across the country. These signatures indicated attempts to replicate key components of the integration without the balanced approach Morgan and Collins had established. Isolated implementations create fragmentation risk, the communication explained. Without harmonization, competing systems will generate interference patterns. Morgan studied the attached data models. Various research teams were attempting to establish their own connections with the electromagnetic entities, developing technologies similar to the interface, but without understanding the crystalline network that provided stability. These fragmented approaches could create competing channels that might distort the integration's carefully calibrated frequencies. We need to reach out to these research teams, Morgan said, forwarding the information to Collins. offer coordination protocols before they establish incompatible systems. Some will welcome collaboration, Collins replied, reviewing the list. Others are deliberately seeking proprietary advantages. Private sector competition isn't easily redirected toward cooperative frameworks. This represented one of the integration's most significant challenges, balancing open access with responsible implementation. The entities made no distinction between private and public, corporate and governmental. They perceived human systems as a single complex network of decision, points and information flows. Human institutions, however, operated through competition, secrecy, and strategic advantage. The entities are concerned about potential resonance cascades, Morgan noted, translating the more complex aspects of their warning. Uncoordinated implementations could create feedback loops in the electromagnetic spectrum, potentially disrupting everything from communications to power grids. I'll escalate this to the Oversight Committee, Collins promised, though their jurisdiction over private research remains limited. As evening approached, Morgan took a rare break from coordination activities, walking to the eastern ridge that concealed the crystalline chamber. The hilltop offered a panoramic view of Willowbrook, the town where generations of the Hayes family had lived, now unwittingly at the center of a global transformation. The frequency detector, which Morgan still carried out of habit, activated unprompted. Unlike the text-based communications of earlier interactions, it now produced a visual representation of the electromagnetic field surrounding the town. Layers of luminous patterns revealed the invisible architecture that had always existed. Alongside the physical world, energy flows, information currents, resonance nodes that connected seemingly disparate points. Within this visualization, Morgan could perceive the entities themselves, not as discrete beings, but as complex pattern organizations within the electromagnetic medium. They existed simultaneously across vast distances, their consciousness distributed, rather than localized. The crystalline chamber served not as their habitat, but as an interface point where their patterns could interact more directly with human technology and perception. "You perceive more clearly now," they communicated. The concept forming directly in Morgan's mind rather than appearing as text. "Your neurological pathways adapt to our patterns." This progressive adaptation had been occurring since the integration, Morgan's brain literally rewiring to process information in new ways. Medical scans showed increased activity in regions typically dormant in human cognition, new neural connections forming between previously unrelated brain areas. "Is this happening to others?" Morgan asked aloud, though true communication with the entities had evolved beyond verbal exchange, at varying rates, according to genetic receptivity and exposure duration. "Your grandfather's modifications to your family line accelerate the process. Others will follow different evolutionary paths." The implication was both exhilarating and concerning. Humanity stood at an evolutionary threshold, not replacing biological existence with technological, as some futurists had predicted, but expanding consciousness to perceive and interact with previously inaccessible aspects of reality. Different individuals and groups would traverse this threshold at different rates and through different mechanisms, creating potential for both remarkable advancement and dangerous division. "How do we prevent fragmentation?" Morgan asked, meaning both technological implementation and human social cohesion. The entity's response came as a multidimensional model showing countless branching timelines, potential futures based on decisions currently being made across global systems. Some branches led to harmonious integration, where electromagnetic perception enhanced human consciousness without disrupting social structures. Others showed fragmentation, with distinct human populations evolving along separate paths, potentially becoming different species over generations. The outcome remains undetermined. Your role as bridge between perceptual frameworks becomes increasingly significant. As darkness fell over Willowbrook, Morgan watched lights illuminate across town. Homes, businesses, street lamps creating a constellation that mirrored the electromagnetic patterns now visible through enhanced perception. Two realities overlaid perfectly, separate yet inseparable. The approaching storm, both meteorological and metaphorical, would test this new relationship between humanity and their electromagnetic companions. The integration had begun, but its ultimate form remained unwritten, a collaborative creation still taking shape through countless decisions and adaptations. Morgan descended from the ridge, returning to the coordination center where work continued through the night. The forgotten echoes had become clear voices, and the conversation between consciousnesses had only just begun. Looking for more? We've got two amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.